to ratify it. The minority in Parliament has raised serious concerns. So have civil society and well-meaning Ghanaians with vast experience in security and international agreements. A couple of days ago, one patriotic Ghanaian posted an article on social media which captures the sentiments of Ghanaians on this blatant attempt by the MPP government to sell this country to foreign interests. Let me quote it for the benefit of those who may not have read it. Beginning of quote, you have an agreement in front of you. The agreement tells you that the army of another country will come into your town. They will occupy some places, access to which will be controlled by them and not you. They will import military equipment which even your security agencies cannot inspect, let alone authorize. Forget about your tax authorities. They can't even levy. The army will operate the equipment and drive them in your streets without your license. The laws of your country don't apply to them. All this means you have no independent means of knowing what they do in your country in order for you to even regulate them. On top of that, no court under the sun can review what they do. And the relationship is such that use of force will not end in your favor. And there is no foreseeable end to this relationship. Yet someone looks into your face and tells you that it is not a military base, and you are there nodding your head. And you think you are all right. There should be no problem if, after a careful assessment, you decide that an American military presence is the path out of your third world shithole circumstances. End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, who is this someone looking into our faces and telling us that the agreement is not about the establishment of a permanent base in Ghana? That someone is Honorable Nitiwu, the Minister of Defense appointed by President Akufo-Addo. His lack of candor and incoherent defense of the proposed agreement is a disservice to the Ghana's military establishment, which has a rich tradition of professionalism and competence. Over the past few days, Honorable Nitiwu has sought to draw parallel of the agreement with previous or existing ones on security cooperation between Ghana and the United States. Let me state clearly that previous agreements on security cooperation between Ghana and United States were very limited in scope. The agreement between Parliament now is extremely wide and unlimited in scope. It has no boundaries and no time frame. It is an agreement in perpetuity. It does not define the number or types of USA Forces personnel to be stationed in Ghana. There is no clarity as to our right of refusal of any personnel in defense of our national interests. All of us saw Mr. Nitiwu on television saying that if you have an agreement where personnel in excess of 10,000 is brought, then you are talking about a base. But what do you say to an agreement with unlimited number? Even if you have 10,000, you know you have 10,000. But this one is saying that unlimited. They decide the number they want to bring here. And you are telling us that it is not a base. If it is not a base, then it is worse than a base. U.S. citizens present in Ghana under the terms of the new agreement will not be subject to any of our immigration laws and will simply be guaranteed admittance in our country simply by presenting their orders at the border point. The Ghana Immigration Service, ladies and gentlemen, would have no jurisdiction over these individuals and will be unable to expel persons who violate our laws. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Nitiwu is pushing for the ratification of the agreement. Sorry, I take that again. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Nitiwu, who is pushing for the ratification of the agreement, could well be cited for treason for attempting to subvert the sovereignty of Ghana. However, we cannot blame him because he is acting on the instructions of President Nana Akufo-Addo, who appears to have been swayed by an award conferred on him on his recent visit by a U.S. lobby firm called the Whitaker Group. We strongly believe the award was orchestrated from some quarters to soften the sitting president of Ghana into ratifying an agreement whose provisions are tantamount to a total sellout of this country. We also strongly believe that recent comment by the U.S. envoy to Ghana describing President Akufo-Addo as more visionary than recent Ghanaian leaders was part of a carefully orchestrated and well-rehearsed strategy to cajole or sweet-talk Nana Addo into signing away the sovereignty of our dear country. Ladies and gentlemen, the move by President Akufo-Addo to ratify the agreement at a time when the U.S. government is engaged in mass deportations of Ghanaians and other Africans demonstrates a high level of insensitivity and disregard for the human rights of his fellow people. The manner in which affected Ghanaians and African deportees are chained, hands and feet, and bundled into planes in a manner reminiscent of the way slaves were shipped across the Atlantic in olden times should have pricked the conscience of Nana Akufo-Addo. True leaders must stand up for their people in times like this. If the MPP government had any regard for the sensibilities of Ghanaians who are at the receiving end of such harsh treatment, it would have thought twice about presenting such an agreement to Parliament. In fact, we should not forget that President Trump has himself described Ghana and predominantly black nations as shitholes. And no formal apology or retraction has been made by his administration or his representatives in Ghana. Why would the U.S. need a military base in a shithole? The NDC believes that it will be a betrayal of the collective dignity of Africa to allow the U.S. to establish a military base here in Ghana. We do not want our country to be used as a forward operating base for whatever military activity the U.S. administration may authorize. Personnel of the United States Armed Forces and civilian security contractors have a long and troubling record of unacceptable behavior, including use of extrajudicial measures. The use of the proposed base in Ghana for any such activities will not, under the proposed agreement, be prosecutable in Ghana, and so the government of Ghana will be unable to uphold the obligations under international law. Ladies and gentlemen, the recurring theme of the U.S. fight against terrorism is that Islam or Islamic extremism is to blame. The establishment of a military base in Ghana, of a U.S. military base in Ghana to combat terrorism, could therefore send wrong signals and make this country a target of extremists. We have witnessed this happen within the West African sub-region. You heard about the bombing in Burkina Faso. The target was a French military base. You heard about the bombings elsewhere in the world. Kenya, where our beloved Professor Kofi Awuno died. It was an attack against Western interests. You hear about what is happening in northern Nigeria, Boko Haram. It's an attack on Western civilization. It is the view of the NDC that existing security cooperation agreements between Ghana and the US are sufficient to encourage bilateral cooperation in the global effort to combat terrorism. Ghana does not need a US military base on our soil to demonstrate our commitment to fight against terrorism. We wish to state here and now that if President Akufo-Addo and his MPP administration proceed to ratify the agreement, despite all protests and public sentiment, the NDC administration, which will assume the reins of government in 2021, will suspend the agreement and initiate a far-reaching review of its provisions. Ghana first is our policy. Let us state clearly that no amount of aid can compensate for the loss of sovereignty which is implicit in the proposed agreement. This should be the basic premise of President Akufo-Addo's own mantra, Ghana beyond aid. Ladies and gentlemen, Article 14 of the proposed agreement constitutes a threat to the privacy of Ghanaians as enshrined in our Constitution. The agreement, as it stands, allows U.S. Armed Forces personnel and U.S. civilian military contractors access to the use of our radio spectra at no cost to them and without oversight by relevant regulatory bodies in Ghana. Under the agreement, there could be surveillance of our private communications, and the government of Ghana will be powerless to check it. This is betrayal of the fundamental freedoms of Ghanaians. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghana is a leading member of the African Union and ECOWAS. We should never abdicate our responsibility to prevent the use of our territory for conduct of activities that may constitute breaches of the sovereignty of our African brethren with whom we truly have shared interests. Ladies and gentlemen, the indecent haste with which the President is going about the proposed agreement is very worrying. Is it because of the promise of aid that has been dangled before him? And will that aid compensate for the loss of our sovereignty, turning Ghana into a client state of the US and the inherent dangers? Our answer is a big no. As a party, we shall stand up for what is right, for what is in the larger national interest. We shall be active citizens, proud of our heritage, won for us through the toil of our forefathers. Ghana must not batter away fundamental tenets of our sovereignty. We demand that the MPP government of President Akufo-Addo withdraw the agreement, reflect on it while engaging the broad spectrum of Ghanaians on our long-term security interests.